Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Instead of just talking about BPD in a more general way, I wanted to talk about one thing that I find is very important, and that is to understand what it's like to actually live with BPD. Now, obviously, if you have it, you know how confusing and difficult it can be, but for family and friends and loved ones, it can be very difficult to understand, and for us it could be even harder to try to explain what it's like. The thing with BPD and mental illnesses in general is that they are a disability, but they're a disability of the mind, and so people forget. It's not like you're in a wheelchair where they can actually see that there's something impairing your day-to-day functioning. Because this is internal, it'd be very, very difficult for other people to not only understand and remember, but then also to have compassion for you. And I think that this makes the entire process of seeking help and changing that much more difficult when you feel as though no one understands you and that you don't have the 100% support from those around you. I think one of the more evident features of having BPD is the emotional dysregulation, and so that's something that I really struggle with. And so one analogy that's often used to describe the experience of those with BPD is comparing them to a burn victim. So imagine that you have third-degree burns covering 90% of your body, and that someone touches you. You're going to jump up in agony, and someone who doesn't have these third-degree burns, you could touch them and nothing would happen. But for us, it's being hypersensitive that makes us go from the 0 to 100 over small things that maybe other people wouldn't consider as distressing. But having this burn on our body is out of our control. It's something that we were born with, and that, trust me, if we could change it, we would. And so what makes this so difficult is that we suppress all of these big emotions inside because we recognize that there may be disproportionate to what's going on. And so to make everyone else more comfortable, we hold everything down. And what happens when we suppress and hold everything in, it's kind of like holding a beach ball underwater. You can try to hold it for as long as you can, but at some point it's going to spring back up. And when it does spring back up, you're so exhausted from trying to hold it down for so long that it's impossible to put it back in its container. And this is kind of where the big emotions come from, and the difficulty with bringing them back down to a base level that's more manageable. Each time that that beach ball springs up, it causes a storm of dysregulated emotions, and after every storm, I get a huge wave of exhaustion, shame, guilt, sadness, hurt, rejection, and I call these the BPD hangovers, where when there's an outburst, then I get a hangover, an emotional hangover for a few days after, where I feel as though I've veered off course, and it takes me a few days to pick myself back up. And then quickly, almost as quickly as the storm came in, I put my mask back on and I start to think rationally again, and I have hope for the future and hope that I'm going to change. And from an outsider's perspective, they think that I'm happy and that I'm doing well. And it's almost as if I'm trying to convince myself and others that there's not this thing in my brain that could at any point just shatter my whole existence. And so I get swept away and carried away into feeling as though there's nothing wrong and that I've conquered BPD. And then something happens and the mask comes off, and all of these maladaptive habits come back up, and I'm back in this cycle of shame and despair and anxiety. And it's really, really difficult to live this way. I think one thing that is very difficult with this whole thing is how lonely being hypersensitive can be. I have an easy enough time understanding people's thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, and why they are acting in the way that they are. but no one really seems to understand why my reactions differ so much from others. And this can be very invalidating because you're essentially being told by other people that your reality and your truth is fundamentally wrong. And so, to some degree, that you are fundamentally wrong. That's something that I struggle with a lot. Feelings that I'm defective and that if I were only to change, then things would be better. But even when you do, it still feels like they aren't. And so I'm still trying to grapple with all of those things. This makes having sustainable and healthy relationships with other people difficult because when you feel at your core that you're defective and that there's something wrong with you, there's an immediate tendency to self-sabotage and to do things that will almost confirm these beliefs that you have about yourself. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that when things feel too stable and too healthy, that you'll act in a way that almost guarantees that these core beliefs come to fruition. And then you can say to yourself, see, I told you, you're a piece of shit and you deserve to be left by everyone and that you're not lovable and that this really is all of your fault. What could be difficult too is that we're not really doing these things consciously. They just kind of come up out of fear and insecurity. And with this feeling of being defective, that also comes with people pleasing to fault. So you will neglect your needs, your personal boundaries, and do everything so that people will love you, which can be extremely damaging, especially when you're in unhealthy relationships with maybe abusive partners or friends or family members. But you take those things because you believe that that's what you're deserving of. Because BPD comes with this fear of being abandoned, I feel like for all of my life I've hid from people my truth and who I truly am out of fear that I wouldn't be good enough and that they wouldn't love me. And what ends up happening with this is because I feel as though I can't truly express myself, I end up directing all of my feelings inside and I self-blame, I self-criticize, I have a lot of hate for myself, and I constantly blame things on myself instead of seeing them objectively for what they are. And that's difficult because I can't get away from that. Other people in my life who are overwhelmed by me can leave. I can't. I'm stuck with my mind and myself until the day that I die. And so yes, it's difficult for friends and family. It's more difficult for us though, who have to not only deal with ourselves, but we're also stuck with ourselves. I feel like for those with BPD, living does not come naturally. Over the years, I had to realize and learn that emotions actually have names, that feelings are okay and even encouraged, and that life is not black and white. There's gray areas in between. And I know that this is difficult for loved ones to understand. It's hard for us to explain to how we feel and how it is to live with BPD. And I know that you hate the way that we act, and trust us, we hate it more, and if we could just get rid of it, we would. Although this video probably did not do justice to what it's like to have BPD, because it's impossible to really know unless you have it, I do hope that this helped to shine light on why we do the things that we do. And if you're still not quite sure what BPD is, I encourage you to go watch my previous videos, which I'll just link above here. But really, subscribing to my channel, sharing my videos is the best way to ensure that the most people can watch these to help to inform everyone about what this misunderstood disorder really is. Thank you for bearing through today's video, and as per usual, I'll be releasing another video next Monday about all things BPD, so be sure to tune in then, and I'll see you back here next week for another episode.